The farmer stopped the wheelchair in the middle of the yard, unable to believe what he was seeing. The little Iris, who had never uttered a single sound in her entire life, held her mother's hand tightly and looked at him. The girl's eyes filled with tears, and then, softly, almost like a whisper, she said the first word anyone there had ever heard from her. Dalva fell to her knees on the dirt ground, and Vicente, for the first time in 5 years, felt the urge to get up from that chair, even if it was just to hug the two of them. There are houses we build with bricks and wood, and there are houses we build with patience, with silence, with a helping hand at the right moment. This is the story of two people that destiny threw into the same storm. A woman who arrived on foot, with no one waiting for her, carrying a daughter who didn't know how to speak, and a man who, 5 years earlier, also didn't know how to walk. Two different ways of being trapped, one single way to free themselves from each other. Come with me and I will tell you this story. The red dirt road seemed endless. Dalva had been walking for 3 days, with a bundle of clothes on her back, and little Iris's small hand held tightly in hers. The 7-year-old girl looked at everything with wide open eyes, but she said nothing. She never said anything. Since she was born, she had not uttered a single word, and the doctors in the big city had already said that perhaps she never would. Dalva had nowhere else to go. Her husband had died of fever 2 winters earlier, and his family, who had never liked her, took the small piece of land they cultivated, claiming that a woman alone had no right to anything. She was left without a house, without crops, without relatives who wanted her around. All that remained was an address scribbled on a crumpled piece of paper that a neighbor had given her go to Fazenda Boa. Esperanza, they say the owner needs people to help with the work. He no longer walks, but he is a good man. That was how Dalva arrived at that gate, at the end of the afternoon, with the sun already low painting, the sky orange and dust stuck to Iris's bare feet. The farm seemed to have seen better days. The fences were crooked in some stretches, the corral empty, the pasture overgrown in certain corners, but the main house, made of stone and dark wood, still had a firm appearance, like someone who resists even when tired. It was Zulmira, the cook who had taken care of the house for 20 years, who opened the door. Yes, miss. Do you need anything? I came looking for work, said Dalva, with the choked voice of someone who no longer had any pride left to spend. They told me you needed people here. I do everything. I wash, I cook, I take care of the plantation, I take care of the animals. I only ask for a roof over our heads for me and my daughter. Zulmira looked at the quiet girl, hidden behind her mother's skirt, and felt her chest tighten. It had been a long time since that house had received any visitors. Since the accident, the boss had closed the doors to the world. Wait here, she said. I will talk to Mr. Vicente. Vicente Anselmo was 42 years old and had a story that the entire region knew by heart. 5 years earlier, a fall from a horse had left him without the movement in his legs. The best rider in those lands, the man who tamed wild colts with a whistle, now lived trapped in a chair, inside a house he himself had stopped caring for. Not out of laziness, out of pain. A pain that was not only in his legs, but in some deeper place, where shame and anger had made a nest. When Zulmira told him about the woman at the door, he almost sent her away. I don't need more strangers hanging around this house. You don't need it, she replied, without fear of contradicting him, because she had known him since he was a boy. This farm is falling apart, and you know it. And that woman has the eyes of someone who has nothing left to lose. People like that work with their whole soul. Vicente remained silent for a while, looking out the window at the abandoned pasture that had once been his father's pride. Let her stay. But I don't want favors or pity. Work for food and shelter. That's what I can offer. It was like that, without ceremony, without any promise, beyond the basics, that Dalva and Iris entered Fazenda Boa, Esperanza. Vicente barely left the office, from where he commanded the farm with notes and dry orders, always avoiding crossing the living room when Dalva was nearby. He didn't like being seen in the chair by new eyes. Every look of pity was like a stab. Dalva, for her part, worked in silence, the way she had learned to live, without bothering, without drawing too much attention, always ready to run if things went wrong, as they had gone so many times before. Iris spent the days sitting under the big jam tree in the yard, playing alone with pebbles and twigs, forming drawings in the dirt. She didn't cry, she didn't laugh out loud, she didn't call her mother. She just observed the world with those big, quiet eyes. It was on a fine rainy afternoon that the first real encounter between Vicente and the girl happened. His wheelchair had gotten stuck in a crack in the wooden ramp that led to the tool shed, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't free himself alone. He shouted for Zulmira, but she had gone to town to buy medicine. He shouted again, and it was Iris who appeared, hidden behind a beam, looking at that big man, strong in the arms, but trapped in his own chair, as lost as she sometimes felt inside. "Girl, go call your mother," he said, trying not to sound desperate. Iris didn't go. Instead, she approached slowly, and with her small hand she began to push a stone that was blocking the wheel. Vicente watched that, moved without quite understanding why. A child who didn't speak, trying with all the strength of her tiny body to free a man she didn't even know. When the wheel finally came loose and the chair slid freely down the ramp, Vicente looked at Iris and said softly, "Thank you, little one." The girl didn't respond with words, but she gave a slight nod of her head. And for the first time in a long time, she sketched something like a smile. It was there, in that simple moment, under the fine rain, that the story of the three began to change direction. In the following days, Dalva noticed a small but real change. Vicente no longer looked away when she crossed the hallway, and Iris, whom before only approached the animals in the corral, began to linger near the veranda at the end of the afternoon, always at a safe distance, like someone who observes before fully trusting. One day, a newborn calf was too weak to nurse on its own, and Vicente, who knew every detail of cattle raising, even without being able to stand, taught Dalva how to prepare the milk and the right position to feed the animal with the bottle. It was hours of work, the two of them sitting on the corral floor, him guiding, her carrying out, and Iris beside them, fascinated, gently touching the calf's snout with a delicacy that surprised everyone. "She has a way with animals," commented Vicente, observing the girl. "Animals sense when a person has a gentle heart." "She has always been like that," replied Dalva, with a mixture of pride and sadness in her voice. "With animals, she is another person. Only with people does she shut down. Maybe it's because animals never raised their voice to her." Dalva didn't answer, but her eyes filled with tears, and Vicente understood, without needing further explanation, that he had touched an old wound. The weeks went by, and the farm began to breathe differently. Dalva cleared the vegetable garden that was overgrown with weeds, taught Zulmira how to make a new seasoning, mended the torn clothes of the workers without ever charging anything beyond what was agreed. She worked from dawn until late at night, like someone who needs to prove every day that she deserves the place where she is. Vicente, little by little, began to leave the office more. At first, only to supervise the work in the corral from a distance. Then, to sit on the veranda while Iris played in the yard. He noticed how the girl always drew the same thing in the dirt. A small house with a big sun above it. Never a person, just a house and the sun. Why does she never speak? He asked Dalva one day when she came to collect the clothes from the line near the veranda. Dalva stopped, the basket of clothes resting on her hip, and for a moment it seemed she would leave without answering. But then, perhaps tired of carrying it alone, she sat on the edge of the stairs, far enough to respect the distance, close enough to be heard. The doctors talk about a complicated name. I only know that she became like this when she was little, after she saw things a child shouldn't see. Her father, my husband, drank too much and fought ugly. One day he hit the wall so hard near the cradle that she never let her voice out properly again. She only cried. After that, not even that. Vicente remained silent, looking at his hands in his lap, the same hands that once held reins and now only held the wheels of his own chair. I understand more than you can imagine about being trapped in something we didn't choose. What happened to you, if I may ask? He took a deep breath. It had been a long time since anyone had asked him that while truly looking at him, and not just at the chair. Wild horse, stony road, a stupid fall. The doctors say I may never walk again. I've already accepted that in my head. The problem is that my heart still hasn't accepted Italiano. It was the first of many conversations on the veranda. Always at dusk. Always with Iris nearby, drawing her houses with sun on the beaten earth. Dalva told of her hard childhood, the hunger she had already endured, the fear she felt every time she had to start over in a new place. Vicente told of the farm that had been his father's, of the dream of having children who would run through those lands. A dream he thought was buried along with the movement of his own legs. Little by little, respect turned into care, and care began to turn into something else, which neither of them dared to name. But not everything was peace on that farm. The neighbors talked. They said it was strange for the boss to be so close to the new employee, a woman without a known family surname, with a strange daughter, as they maliciously whispered at the village fair. One day, Vicente's older brother, Norberto, appeared unexpectedly at the farm. A businessman, always in a suit, even under the strong sun, looked sideways at Dalva serving coffee and said, without mincing words, as soon as he was alone with his brother, "You are letting that woman take over everything here. People are talking. Vicente, they say you have lost your mind, that a caregiver is taking advantage of your weakness." "She is not my caregiver," replied Vicente, his voice firmer than it had been in years. "And I am not weak. Just because I don't walk." "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant." Vicente gripped the wheels of the chair tightly. "You come here once every 6 months. Norberto, you don't know who took care of this land, who helped me get up when I didn't even want to leave anymore. Before judging, you should thank her. Because while you were taking care of your business in the city, it was this woman who brought life back to this house." Norberto left upset, but his words left a shadow. Dalva, who had overheard part of the conversation unintentionally, felt the old fear return. The fear of never being good enough, of always being seen as a burden. Hassan. That night, she packed her bundle of clothes again, determined to leave before the situation got worse. It was Iris who stopped her. The girl, seeing her mother folding clothes in a hurry, ran to the dresser, picked up the drawing she had made that afternoon. The same little house, the same sun, and placed it on top of the bundle with both little hands, looking at her mother with a silent request so strong that it needed no words. Dalva sat down on the bed, hugged her daughter, and cried like she hadn't cried in years. She didn't leave. The next day, it was Vicente who sought her out first, something he had never done. "I heard you almost left yesterday. I heard your brother. I don't want to bring you trouble, Dalva." It was the first time he called her by name, without miss, without distance. "The only problem this farm has had in the last 5 years has been me. Locked in my own pride. You and your daughter brought back something I thought I had lost forever. Don't leave because of other people's mouths. But the peace of mind the two had found in that moment would still be tested." Zulmira, who had seen more sadness than joy pass through the farm in those last years, watched everything with a discreet smile while stirring the pots. One night, after Iris was already asleep, she called Dalva to have a coffee in the kitchen. "You know, Miss, I have already lost count of how many times I saw Mr. Vicente sitting on that veranda, staring at nothing, since you arrived with the girl. It is the first time I see that man looking at something with desire again. I didn't come here looking for that Zulmira. I came looking for work. I know, my daughter, but sometimes life gives more than we ask for. We just need the courage to accept it." Zulmira served more coffee, the steam rising between the two. "Don't let other people's fear decide the size of the happiness you deserve." Those words echoed in Dalva's head for days, especially when, one morning at the fair in the neighboring village, she heard 2 women whispering near the vegetable stand. "It's that one who works at Vicente's farm. They say she already gives more orders than the boss himself. And the daughter, poor thing, doesn't even speak properly. God forbid I cross like that. Dalva felt her face burn with shame and anger at the same time. But she continued on, holding Iris's hand tighter, pretending she hadn't heard. It was only when she got back to the farm, already hidden behind the chicken coop, that she let the tears fall. Alone, as she always made sure to do, far from other people's eyes. She didn't know that this time she wasn't so alone. Vicente, who had gone there to check on the chickens, saw the scene from afar. For the first time since the accident, felt an almost physical urge to get up from that chair just so he could hug her without the distance between them weighing so much. He approached slowly. What happened? Nothing, Mr. Vicente. Silly woman things. There is no such thing as silly crying. Tell me. And she told him. She told him about the fair, about the neighbors, about the weight of always carrying other people's judgment, about never being able to simply live without having to explain herself. Vicente listened to everything in silence, and when she finished, he spoke with a firmness she had never heard in his voice before. Those people will never understand the value you have because they never had to be strong the way you were. Don't let other people's tongues weigh more than the truth of your own story. It was there, in that moment, that the two understood, without needing to say it out loud, that what they felt had no way back. Summer arrived, bringing drought, and with the drought came the greatest trial that Fazenda Boa Esperança would face that year. The stream that supplied the plantation dried up almost completely, and much of the cattle began to get sick due to lack of clean water. Vicente, who had not left the limits of the house since the accident, made a decision that left everyone speechless. He asked to be taken to the old well at the back of the property, a well that his father had dug decades earlier and that was forgotten, covered with weeds. If this well still has water, he said to the workers, we will save the harvest and the cattle, but I need to see it with my own eyes. It was a full day of heavy work. The chair pushed over uneven ground, men digging around the old well under the merciless sun. Dalva did not leave the place all day, carrying water for the workers, encouraging them when spirits fell. It was at dusk when they finally heard the sound of water down there. That joy exploded among the workers. The well still had water, and in abundance. In the middle of the celebration, however, Vicente's chair, poorly positioned on the loose dirt near the edge, began to sleep. He tried to hold the wheels, but the ground gave way, and for a second it seemed he would plunge into the well along with loose stones. Dalva ran and held the chair with all the strength she had, shouting for help. The men came running, and together they managed to pull Vicente away from the edge, both falling seated on the dirt, panting, hearts racing. It was then that it happened. Iris, who had run after her mother as soon as she heard the shouting, arrived running, her little eyes full of tears, seeing that man she already loved as if he were part of her own family. There, hurt, with a cut on his arm, but alive. And before any thought could stop her, before the old fear had time to silence her voice again, the girl opened her mouth, and what came out was a small, hoarse sound, almost a breath, but whole, clear, true. Dad. Time seemed to stop. Dalva brought her hands to her mouth, unable to believe it. Zulmira, who had also come running, began to cry right there, in the middle of the bushes, and Vicente, with his injured arm and his heart in pieces from emotion, stretched out his arms to the girl, who ran and threw herself into them. Again, little one, he asked, his voice choked. Say it again, Dad, repeated Iris, now with more firmness, as if each repetition unlocked a little more of what had been trapped inside her for so many years. Dalva knelt beside the two, unable to contain her tears. It wasn't just her daughter regaining her voice. It was living proof that there was, yes, a safe place in the world, that there was a lap that didn't hurt, that there was a house that didn't cause pain. Vicente looked at Dalva over the girl's head and said, with all the sincerity a man can have after years of hiding feelings behind pride, I haven't walked on my own legs for 5 years, Dalva, but I have never felt so upright as I do now, with the two of you by my side. You don't need to say that out of gratitude, she replied, still crying. It is not gratitude. He held her hand. There in the middle of the bushes, dirty with earth, injured, but whole inside for the first time in a long time. It is love, Dalva. Simple as that. I love you, and I love this girl as if she were mine from always. I don't know how to walk, but I know how to promise fidelity for the rest of my life. If you will allow me. Dalva did not respond with words. She held his hand tighter, rested her forehead against his, and there, under the sky that was beginning to darken, the three finally formed the portrait of a family that neither of them imagined they deserved. The following months brought a simple wedding, held in the farm's own yard, under the jam tree where Iris had always played alone. Norberto, the brother who had judged so much, was the first to apologize, moved to see his brother smiling as he had not smiled since before the accident. Vicente never walked again, but he learned, over time, that he didn't need to stand to be whole. The farm prospered again, the fences were repaired, the cattle fattened, and the dark stone house filled with children's laughter, something those walls had not heard for generations. Iris grew up speaking more and more, slowly, in her own time, but always finding someone who had the patience to listen. And she learned, in addition to words, the most beautiful lesson that farm could teach. That family is not always the one we are born with, but often the one we find when we no longer expect anything. This story reminds us of a simple truth, but one we easily forget in the rush of everyday life. No one is defined by what they lack. Vicente was not less of a man for not walking. Iris was not less of a child for not speaking. And Dalva was not less worthy of love for arriving with empty hands. Sometimes life breaks us in different ways, some inside, some outside, and the world insists on labeling us by what we lost. But true love, true union, does not look at the lack. It looks at the wholeness that exists despite the lack. That is what Vicente, Dalva, and Iris teach us. That we can be a home for each other, even when our own body or our own voice insists on not cooperating. May we keep this lesson in our hearts. Fidelity is not in the legs that walk, nor in the voice that speaks loudly. It is in the daily choice to stay, to care, to wait for the other in their own time. And that is how a family is truly built. If this story touched your heart, leave your comment below telling which moment moved you the most. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell, and share this story with someone who needs to remember that true love does not look at limitations, it looks at the heart. A kiss, and until the next story.